Ladies, mental gen, railbikes and railcars, welcome to another episode of Rank 10 Yu-Gi-Oh's Legacy of the Worthless. If you aren't familiar yet, in this series we're looking at the most unplayable archetypes ever shut out by Konami's executive asshole, what exactly makes those archetypes so horrible, and what could have been improved in order for them to be less awful. The grading scale we use involves consistency, power, comeback ability, protection and versatility, and an archetype is considered terrible if it doesn't excel in any of these categories. With that said, let's begin this episode's topic. As it was predicted by the Crystal Seer to inevitably happen, we are going back to yet another GX archetype, which will most likely have to do a few times again after this video. But whereas one of the redeeming qualities of Neos from the last episode was their lovely visual design, this set of cards focuses on an absolutely genius concept that couldn't possibly fail. Vehicles! With eyes! And limbs where their wheels are supposed to be. That's it! Their anime fame, if you can call it that, came from being used by everyone's favorite Yu-Gi-Oh! GX character, what was his name again, alright, Pussy Destroyer. This video will naturally only be covering Vehicroids because the existence of a certain other, newer and significantly less terrible archetype with roid in its name might confuse people as to what the roid support cards are actually referring to. We'll get into naming shenanigans later, so now let's just kick it off with the monster lineup. Roid is a level 2 wind machine with 300 attack and 500 defense and prevents the opponent from attacking any monster you control other than Roid. Monsters that modify attack targets are very few and far between, but whereas something like, for example, controlling 2 solar flare dragons would prevent the opponent from attacking altogether, or even something like Gentlemander at least being a level 4 and having a neat summoning condition, Roid doesn't exactly excel in anything other than a certain mediocre and extremely hard to pull off loop I'll get into later. And if you're wondering about the rulings, controlling 2 Roids doesn't prevent the opponent from attacking, but simply gives him a choice of which sad little card to run over first. Ambulance Roid, and yes, adding Roid at the end of random vehicle-related words is the naming convention of this archetype, is a level 3 Earth machine with 300 attack and 1200 defense, and when a Roid monster is added from your graveyard to the hand, you can special summon that monster. This sounds like something that would be neat if the archetype was actually focused on retrieving stuff from the graveyard, which it most certainly is not, because they have only like 2 cards that do this, of which one is Rescue Roid. A level 6 with a pathetic 1600 attack and 1800 defense, and whenever a Roid monster you control is destroyed by battle, you can return that monster to the hand. This is an effect for a goddamn field spell, not a level 6, furthermore a level 6 with stats that would be considered okay on a level 4. Also, the Roid loop I was talking about earlier involves getting Ambulance Roid and Rescue Roid on the field, having some shit like Cyber Summon Blaster, and then praying for 1 in a billion chance that the opponent will be using a monster that must attack everything you control, like Ultimate Tyranno, or locking them into the battle phase by other means, which in turn would mean they have to attack into the respawning Roid over and over and over again until Cyber Summon Blaster OTKs them. And there you have it, the most inconsistent OTK in the world, which the aforementioned Pussy Destroyer actually managed to pull off in GX in a duel against Dino DNA, setting aside the fact that the latter let him win. But we're not done yet with these. Since GX was the period of experimentation with fusion concepts, Roids got a few fusions of their own, but the problem is in the fact that some of them fall into the early GX category of fusions, if you catch my drift. So here's the imaginatively named Ambulance Rescue Roid, which you make by fusing Ambulance Roid and Rescue Roid, I know, what a shocker, and once per turn when a monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon that monster in defense position. Basically they merged the effects of Ambulance Roid and Rescue Roid, gave them some more collective attack, made it work on any monster, not only Roids, but they also gave it a soft once per turn clause, meaning the loop from earlier still relies on its 2 fusion materials being on the field. The card itself isn't anything I would consider god-awful, it's average GX battle protection and an okay beater for the time, and I may be stretching it a bit too far, but I think it would have seen a bit more play if it wasn't part of such a crappy set of cards. Keep in mind I just mentioned okay for the time, because it might pop up a few more times during this video, all under a different context. Gyroid is usually a furniture item, but you can also find Gyroid as NPCs in some of the Animal Crossing games. Gyroid is also a special item that sits outside the player's house and allows the saving of progress, but I'm just fucking with you. Gyroid is a level 3 wind machine with 1000 attack and defense, and once per turn it cannot be destroyed by battle. It's fine for the time period. The effect is about as generic as it gets, but it served its purpose during way slower formats where building up huge fields first turn was very uncommon, so setting a Gyroid was a decent first turn play if you wanted some tribute fodder for your deck. That is, of course, if you couldn't afford Marshmallow, which is kind of an objectively better choice. And mind you, Gyroid came out 3 years after it, at least in the OCG. Expressroid is a train, but it's a level 4, so who gives a shit. When you summon this card, you can add 2 Roid monsters from your graveyard to the hand, except Expressroid. To be honest, this is legit good recovery, especially if you happen to be controlling Ambulance Roid, because that would mean you go from 1 monster on the field to 4 in a single normal summon, even though obviously this play requires some setup and is very easily disruptible. The only real problem I have with this card is that it only has 400 attack, so unless you use it for Xyz or something during the turn you summon it, you're most likely to suffer a train crash next turn. So yeah, it's pretty good for its time. Also, is that train drifting? Deja vu! Submarineroid? Seriously? You couldn't have called it Submaroid or something? Well, anyway, it's a level 4 with 800 attack and 1800 defense and has a decently interesting effect. It can attack the opponent directly, but the damage is always equal to this card's original attack, which is 800, and after the card attacked, you can change it to defense position. This doesn't do jack shit nowadays, but goddamn did it ever kick ass in Tag Force 1. Jokes aside, the effect isn't exactly anything great, even though the card did serve as a decent wall and attacker for casual play back when it came out, but I appreciate the imagination put into it. This could have easily just said this card can attack the opponent directly, but they opted for something unique instead, and I'm glad about that. Now I kinda wanna see a whole archetype made out of these pokey, changey, mangy monsters. Can I call him that? I'm gonna call him that. Carrieroid, alright, that name actually sounds pretty good, is a level 4 with 1000 attack and 800 defense, and when the opponent activates a card effect that would destroy a spell or trap card you control, you can discard 1 card to negate the activation and destroy that card. Horrible stats? Check. Out of place cost? Check. No relation to the rest of the archetype? Check-a-roni. This is as bog standard as old archetype quote-unquote support comes. But oh boy, splash it into metal foes and you can negate some of that nasty Twin Twister. No, seriously, do it. Put Carrieroid in a Pendulum deck and use its effect to negate scale or back row destruction. If you do it and send me a replay, I'll feature it on the next video 100%. And no setting up matches, you cheating swine. Shuttleroid is a level 4 with 1000 attack and 1200 defense, and when it's targeted for an attack, you can banish it, then special summon it during your next standby phase and burn the opponent for 1000 damage. I heard Chainbeat. Did anyone else hear Chainbeat? Yeah, that's what this is supposed to be apparently. And to be honest, much like Submarineroid, while it's not a great card by itself, it's an interesting idea at least. Given that it came out in 2007, you might look at this as some kind of prototype Chainbeat as already mentioned, and even though it gets taken care of by any non-battle destruction means, it might be a decent card to try out in said deck, maybe in combination with something like Drowning Mirror Force. Oh, but wait, you can't do that, because this image here is a proxy, and Shuttleroid is actually a 9-year-old OCG exclusive and absolutely no one gives a shit. I like to believe Konami just forgot about it, and that there's that one guy in the meetings that always goes, guys, should we like import Shuttleroid? It's been 9 years. And then everyone else is like, haha, there goes Silly John and his cocaine again. Truckroid is a mother truck in level 4 with 1000 attack and 2000 defense, and if it destroys a monster by battle, you can equip that opponent's monster from their graveyard to this card. This card gains attack equal to the combined attack of those cards. Truck me, that's cool. I seem to be noticing a common theme with these cards, and that's need for casual play during their time period, and Truckroid is like the embodiment of this. Now, I'm not saying that Truckroid beatdown was meta or anything, but I can tell you for a truck in fact that stacking this thing up with equip spells and just ramming it into anything the opponent controls used to be an absolutely wonderful time to have. Here's my recommendation. Build Truckroid beatdown with a new gadget engine and a bunch of equips, and let this thing curb stomp anything and everything which is sure to give you a good old truckle. Roid is a level 4 with 1200 attack and 0 defense, and if it attacks, if you control another Roid monster, you can destroy 1 spell or trap card at the end of the battle phase. Well, that's not very stealthy. I think end of the battle phase while you control at least 2 Roid monsters, of which one with 1200 attack did battle and lived, is a bit too late to be popping back row. I can't for the love of my life think of a situation where this would ever be relevant. I guess that's why it's called Stealth Roid, because it never sees play? Well, that's fucking genius! Wish I could say the same about Clifford's Stealth then. Patroid, and I'm frankly disappointed this one isn't a mechanized postman Pat, is a level 4 with 1200 attack and defense, and once per turn during your main phase, you can look at one face down card your opponent controls, then return it to its original position. Haha, say goodbye to days of blind MSTing artifact format. Now I know exactly where to aim, and they're all moral tech. I mean, why wouldn't it be? Anyway, if I want info about the opponent's back row or set monsters, I'll be running Swords of Revealing Light or Bait Doll or fucking whatever. I'll play goddamn Shogi Knight, but not this thing that synergizes with this deck about as well as Royal Knight does with Ice Barriers. Dark Geroid is a... wait, what the fuck? That's not a car. With eyes? That's a goddamn necromorph! Yes, funny jokey jokes aside, cars with roid in their names, such as Dark Geroid, Elemental Hero Necroid Shaman, and Magical Android, all actually fall under the roid archetype, even though they weren't originally designed for it. So in case you're running the infamous Elemental Hero Magical Geroid FTK, be sure to tack in a few express roids to retrieve your combo pieces. Jetroid is a level 4 with 1200 attack and 1800 defense, and when it's attacked, you can activate trap cards from your hand. Neat idea, but unless your opponent is actually mentally incapacitated, normal summoning Jetroid would pretty much be exactly the same as openly saying, "Hey bro, I have a mirror force, could you please attack, thanks?" And in this day and age, it's a question if something like Jetroid would even survive past the opponent's main phase. Drillroid is a level 4 with 1600 attack and defense, and if it attacks a defense position monster, you can destroy that monster immediately without applying damage calculation. Yes, I know, this is okay. Actually, in what it does, it's better than all other monsters that instantly destroy defense position monsters, because this is literally the only card among those which effect isn't limited to face down defense position monsters. So please, a round of applause for Drillroid for not being complete ass. Alright, enough, we don't want to getting too confident. Steamroid is a train, but again it's a level 4 and not a very good one. God damn it, stop teasing me like this. It has 1800 attack and defense, and when it attacks a monster, it gains 500 attack during the damage step only, but when it's attacked, it loses 500 during the damage step. For its time, this was one of the least bad roids, even though that's not saying much. Interesting axe effect, and I could see this being used on a locals level as an out to some problematic tribute monsters back then, but other than being a quick beater and an even quicker dyer, there's not much to Steamroid. UFO-roid, wow, seriously? You guys must have worked so hard on that name. He's a level 6 with 1200 attack and defense, and when he's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one machine-type monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck in face-up attack position. Does this effect perhaps seem familiar to you? Pyramid Turtle does it for zombies, Howling Insect does it for insects, Masked Dragon does it for dragons, etc, etc. But not only do all these monsters have better stats, they're also not goddamn tribute monsters for whatever reason. If this had been 2 levels lower, I'd have actually called it a really good card and it would have probably seen play at some point, but I presume they made this harder to summon because they thought this kind of generic machine support would be too strong, setting aside the fact that limiter removal was a thing for 5 years before this card. Call it ignorance or delusion or whatever, but to this day, I firmly believe someone over at Konami made a typo and gave this card 2 additional levels and nobody could be asked enough to fix it. Armoroid is a level 8 with a formidable 2700 attack and 2000 defense, and has the following effect. If this card is tribute summoned by tributing at least one roid monster, banish all spell and trap cards on the field. The effect itself is neat and could even be fairly devastating to your average pendulum deck, but the cost makes it near impossible to pull off consistently. As you probably noticed by now, roids really aren't good at keeping field presence, let alone making enough of it for a 2 tribute monster in any kind of serious match. In my opinion, this should have had a special summoning condition akin to Batteryman Industrial Strength, so that it could at least serve as comeback potential rather than being an inconsistent boss monster. And the last main deck roid monster would be Psychroid, a vanilla with 800 attack and 1000 defense, and he's, I quote, "the most lovable and friendly of all the Vehicroids." Yeah, he don't look that way to me. He looks like he wants to steal my lunch money and drive away with it.
It can arm itself with training wheels.
What, does he just take the training wheels and start hitting you upside the head with? Never mind, it was an anime card. That's far less interesting than the other option. Moving on. Pair Psychroid, or as I like to call it, Psychroid Gets Jacked! Is a fusion monster that you summon by fusing any 2 machine-type monsters with the same name. It has 1600 attack and it can attack the opponent directly. It may not look like much, but Pair Psychroid was actually fairly relevant in machine decks focused on fusion, mainly Cyber Dragons. This thing was basically their own version of Cowboy for game, and 1600 attack is usually more than enough to finish off limping opponents. And thank fuck the summoning condition isn't 2 Psychroids, or this section of the video would be spoken in a completely different tone. Now, the next fusion, Steam Gyroid, is actually very interesting because it was considered way ahead of its time when it came out, and not many new players know of its infamous time while it stayed forbidden on the ban list for 2 years. It's a 2200 attack level 6 fusion of Steamroid and Gyroid, and its effect is the following. Cannot be special summoned except by fusion summon. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can send one roid monster from your hand to the graveyard, then target one monster the opponent controls, take control of that target. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target one roid monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. Now, you can clearly see how this could have made an impact on the meta during the time it came out, and to be honest, this effect still holds up pretty decently even today. Disruption on either player's turn is nothing to joke about, especially if it involves taking control of monsters, and the recovery it gives is very admirable and reminiscent of Shadows. If one desires to build a fun and effective roid deck nowadays, Steam Gyroid Turbo is definitely the way to go. Nah, I'm just fucking with you, it's a shitty ass vanilla with no effect. Now get that shit out of my face so I don't have to stare at it anymore. God, who the fuck came up with that thing? Super Vehicroid Jumbo Drill is a 3000 attack fusion of Steamroid, Drillroid and Submarineroid. It's advanced engineering, don't ask me how they got this thing out of those things. And its only effect is that it deals piercing damage, as was kinda common in GX at the time. Back while Future Fusion was a thing, this was pretty much the only decent play Vehicroids could make, and yet still it was simply a protectionless beater that you needed to go -4 to summon. Funnily enough, roids weren't the only deck that could summon it, because Cyber Dragon Nova, you know, that thing you make when you need to go into Infinity, yeah, it used to be just that for a while, I know, it's really weird. Anyway, Cyber Dragon Nova, when sent to the graveyard by an opponent's effect, could special summon a machine-type fusion monster from your extra deck, and Jumbo Drill was usually a decent choice other than Cyber End Dragon. Feeling a bit of a Ice Barrier deja vu here, extra deck monsters barely summonable by their own archetype, but abusable by something completely different. Speaking of deja vu, does anyone remember the top 10 hardest monsters to summon video? Because a friend from there makes a return! Everyone, please boo for Super Vehicroid Stealth Union. Okay, enough!
Ooh, you suck!
Yeah, you're the one to talk. Anyway, it's a 3600 attack fusion of Truckroid, Expressroid, Drillroid and Stealthroid, making it an inherent -4 at best, but usually -5 at least. The effect is your generic GX anime ultimate boss monster, as in super hard to summon, with shitty battle-oriented effects. It deals piercing damage, and once per turn you can target one non-machine type monster on the field and equip it to discard. While equipped this way, this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. So, what's the catch? When this card attacks, its original attack is halved during the damage step only. Because the card wasn't already a pain in the asshole to bring to the field since it requires a fusion of 4 barely playable and barely searchable monsters, for some reason they felt it was necessary that its attack should be 1800 while it attacks, making it almost entirely replaceable by fucking Asura Priest. I would argue that the 1000 dice-ish snatch effect is neat, but even that feels kinda out of place because, for some reason, it doesn't work on machine types, and it gives no protection whatsoever. Even if the summoning condition was far less obnoxious, like for example any 4 roid monsters, the card would still be an underwhelming mess and a shamefully easy to out boss monster. And that's a goddamn shame because that artwork is absolutely magnificent. UFO Roid Fighter is a level 10 fusion of UFO Roid and any warrior type monster, and its only effect is that its attack is equal to the combined attack of the monsters used for its summon. Anyone who has played the game for longer than a month can see that this is supposed to be a gimmicky OTK card, especially in combination with cards such as Power Bond and Limiter Removal, which is fine I guess, it's just that this isn't much of a Roid card. This isn't something you would want to run in an average Roid deck, but instead it's a card you build an entire deck around, and pretty much the only reason why it exists is because they used it in one episode of GX to fuse UFO Roid with Elemental Hero Tempest, which is, coincidentally, another crappy fusion monster. Also, UFO Roid makes it look like it's riding a Segway, and that's really funny to me. And the final, ultimate Roid monster, which ironically enough only appeared in the manga, is Barbaroid, the ultimate battle machine. It's summoned by fusing 5 machine-type Roid monsters. Ah shit, I can't use Dark Geroid. It's a level 12 with 4000 attack and defense and has the following effect. It can attack twice during the same battle phase, but it can't attack directly. After damage calculation, negate the effects of all the monsters destroyed by this card, including the ones in the graveyard, and whenever this card destroys a monster by battle, burn the opponent for 1000 damage. So yeah, that's actually pretty badass, no question about it. Gigantic beater, attacks twice, negates effects, burns it's pretty good for what it is. The problem, of course, because there has to be a problem, is the summoning condition. Even though it's wonderfully generic for this archetype, getting 5 Roid monsters present and accounted for along with polymerization is not a very easy task to pull off. However, you might have seen this card present in some Cosmo extra decks, probably for the same reason why you would see Jumbo Drill and Cyber End Dragon in Cyber Dragon decks. And that is because Cosmos can make Cyber Dragon Nova, some moron can be stupid enough to negate its summon and destroy it, and then they get a nasty surprise when Nova brings out this beast. So again, we have a case of a good boss monster which is sadly unusable by its own archetype, yet abusable by something else. This is like the card game equivalent of cuckolding. As for the spells and traps, we thankfully don't have to stick around very long. Vehicroid Connection Zone is literally just polymerization, but only for Vehicroid monsters, which means you can only bring out Jumbo Drill and Stealth Union with it, and also it gives them protection from destruction by card effects and prevents their effects from being negated. This sounds like it would be great if said Vehicroids didn't have such goddamn specific summoning conditions, or if it worked on any Roid fusion monster, or even better, if it acted as a miracle fusion for the archetype, which would actually be lovely, but because it's none of these things, it might just be one of the most inconsistent archetypal fusion spells ever made. Next. Supercharge is a normal trap that you can activate when the opponent declares an attack while you only control machine type roid monsters. Draw 2 cards. But what does Supercharge do? Memes aside, this is actually good. In the last video I mentioned how Convert Contact is one of the least restrictive archetypal Pot of Greed cards ever, so here's another one. The monster being attacked is probably gonna die, but at least you're gonna get some decent draws out of it so that you can summon more monsters that can die immediately after it. But that's not Supercharge's fault, so who am I to judge? And surprisingly enough, we're already at the last roid card and they don't exactly go out with a bang. Wonder Garage is a normal trap and its effect says, when this face down card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower machine type roid monster from your hand. You know how earlier I made a joke about blind MSTing in artifact format resulting in moral tag fucking you over? Well, this is the exact opposite of a punishment the opponent should suffer for blind MSTing. Special summon a level 4 or lower roid monster from the hand? That shit's something that should be a normal spell card or activate when a roid monster is normal summoned, not the floating effect of a trap. For one, this shouldn't be limited to low level monsters, and also, from the hand? Fuck that, let me retrieve stuff from the graveyard or build my plays from the main deck, give me something I don't have immediate access to. And to some of you that are probably saying, oh, but you can use your own MST on it. If an archetype relies on going -2 to build up field presence with shitty low level monsters, it's not a very good archetype. Oh my god, I didn't expect this to be this short, but it still felt like a goddamn eternity. Now let's dish out some grades to sum up just how terrible these things really are. Consistency. Beyond Supercharge, which still relies on a monster of yours getting potentially destroyed, roids barely plus off anything, so that's irrelevant. Power. Other than Barbaroid, which is near impossible for them to summon, there's really not much going on here. Most of their monsters have absolutely pathetic stats for their levels. Comeback ability. They almost had something here, but the only possible quote-unquote comeback for roids is having Ambulance Roid on the field, at least 2 roids in the graveyard, normal summoning Express Roid and getting set 2 roids out on the field, but this is an insanely unreliable combo which doesn't do much but maybe enable a single rank 4 play. Protection. What, Decoy Roid? Connection Zone for the fusions? Give me a break. Versatility. Well, they can sure give Shape Snatch Turbo a run for its money. So, what could have been done to make roids better? I know I pulled this with Genex already, but I don't fucking know. With Genex you could at least somewhat see the point of what they're supposed to be, but roids are literally just random pack filler garbage thrown together as an archetype for some reason. And I can't deduce their win condition or goal or whatever from that. It would be like doing a Legacy of the Worthless by randomly guessing 20 card numbers and reviewing them as stuff that's apparently supposed to synergize with itself. Even the anime acknowledged how god-awful these things were and made Pussy Destroyer's cardiac arrested brother Dick Destroyer teach him how to play some fucking Cyber Dragons. But then he couldn't play those either, but it's okay, cause he got character development. Who cares about that? We need more card games! Disclaimer, this is a joke and GX actually has fantastic character development. Ladies and mental gen, railbacks and railcars, thank you all for watching this episode of Rank 10 Yu-Gi-Oh's Legacy of the Worthless. If you liked it, do remember to subscribe and then give me all your money on my Twitch channel. And I'll see you next time.